Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
According to the latest CNBC All-American Economic Survey, Vice President Joe Biden leads President Trump by 47% to 38% among registered voters. Yet these voters still favored Trump 44% to 38% over Biden when asked who has the best policies for the economy. And Biden's gaining ground among young voters in the midst of protest over Black Lives Matter and recent police killings. There's a lot going on in the world, and this has influenced, inevitably, as it would, the presidential election. So hopefully it's obvious why you care, depending on whether you support Trump or Biden, or you're not sure who you support, whether you're supportive of the protests or not, whether you think the pandemic is a hoax or not. All of this goes into the decision we make this November. It's been a little while since Lance and I talked about it, so it's time to take it on today. Look at why is Biden gaining support amongst young voters? This is a demographic he's struggled with historically. Is it because they like him? Or is there something else going on? Well, that's what we're going to look at today. But before we do, we couldn't begin a conversation on Joe Biden, President Trump, and all things related to the 2020 election without
True Chat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, you know, I'm excited about this show because you finally broke through and letting us talk about a little presidential politics here in the election year. You always hold us back. You don't want to hit people with it too much of it too early, but now's the time. So I'm excited to talk about this. And as you mentioned, though, still 15% undecided, because in the poll taken from June 19th to the 22nd of 2020, it shows that Mr. Biden is up 47 to 38. And if my math is still good, we still do math the old fashioned way, that's 85%, which means we've still got 15% undecided. So, I think that kind of is especially where we should be right now.
the situation, Lance, right? We're talking about millennials. That'd be my generation. And the interesting thing here is millennials form the largest share of eligible, keyword here, eligible voters of any age group now. That's the situation. They are also more Democratic leaning relative to older generations, according to Pew Research. The majority of millennials backed Hillary Clinton in 2016, and the reason that they now seem interested in backing Joe Biden when previously they had been lukewarm at best is not because they've suddenly fallen in love with him, but rather because of President Trump's response to much of what's going on in regards to Black Lives Matter and the protests over police killings and police violence. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. We talked about the poll overall, Lance, right? 47 to 38, that 9-point spread there. But when we look at racial equality, okay, racial equality, Biden is favored. It is a 25 percentage point spread when we talk about racial equality. So we're well outside the margin of error.
Among millennials.
Yeah. No, this
correct?
is all voters. Excuse me. All voters. But this is the big thing that's contributing, that's been identified by the Wall Street Journal. Again, both of these articles linked at thestateofus.org. The Wall Street Journal has identified this particular data set from the CNBC poll as the biggest reason that millennials have warmed up to Biden. They conducted a host of interviews with millennials from all around the country. And one of the recurring themes, Lance, is this idea that, you know, we don't agree with about half of what Biden wants to do, but we agree with almost nothing that Trump wants to do. And so we're going to vote for Biden because we are focused on racial equality. We want this to become a reality, and we don't see that happening with Trump. So we're choosing Biden, not because we love Biden, but because Biden represents a better chance to get what we want, which in this case is the racial equality.
Well, 3 quick points. And one, it's interesting. Will the millennials continue their desire to vote through the rest of the summer and the fall? Right now, they're very active. They're very politically motivated. And it's awesome to see, because we've always talked about that, right? With any group, any subgroup. We want everybody to be politically motivated and politically active. But historically, millennials as a group are not that way. They are right now. So having the numbers there of the largest eligible voting group, and the article talks about how almost 4 times as many millennials were registered this last month as compared to 2016, like 140 some thousand to 35,000 or something like that in 2016. So will millennials keep their interests until November and then actually go to the polls and do their voting for Biden? Secondly, they're doing it because they have to choose between, and I think this is correct, the 2 oldest people to ever run for president in the same election. I think having both of these 70-year-old plus white males, they're the 2 oldest candidates in any presidential election. And so, as you pointed out, millennials have to choose between the lesser of 2 evils. And while they don't like everything about Biden, they like a whole lot more about Biden, or the possibility of what Biden can do, than what they've seen Trump do. Because I think that's an interesting point now. 4 years ago, it was, well, what will Trump do? He really didn't have a track record. You know, he had been a Democrat. He's running as a Republican. He's saying all this stuff, but the presidency's got a lot of power to it, and it kind of keeps people in check, you know? And what will happen? Well, we now have 4 years of seeing what Donald Trump will do as president. So whether you really like it or you don't like it, at least now you have some a base of work from which to look at him. And then I think the third part, and this is in the article as well, is President Obama went on Joe Biden's website and gave a little talk telling young people, remember, the political process takes longer than what you want it to do, but Joe Biden is the way to get done what you want done. And I think that's going to be another thing. Will young people have the necessary patience to realize that, as we've talked about many times on the show, that the wheels of policy just take a while to get moving, but that's the way that you're going to get more people on board. So those are my 3 main points there about this millennial group and whether they will hold together for Biden over the next 4 months.
One of the big things that we have to look at coming up, Lance, is the economy and jobs, because this is an area that Trump still enjoys amongst all voters an advantage on, which, I mean, when we look at the data, right, over the last number of years in terms of how everything's been performing, it's no surprise that he's enjoying this lead. It's hard for any candidate. And this this is not at all a defense or excuse of Joe Biden, because he's not my favorite candidate either. But any candidate, Joe Biden or otherwise, if you're not in office, if a president is doing well on the economy, it's damn near impossible to run on that and beat them, because you don't have, it's harder as an issue to point to anything. Most of what you're going to point to is hypothetical, right? And on the economy, when you're talking about people's money, they like the concrete stuff. And what they know right now is that while Trump's been in office, the stock market's done well. You know, that's what they know. The quote unquote economy has done well. And I know that's a loaded statement, because people will say, well, how are we measuring that? And that's where this other portion comes into play, Lance. Racial equality, you've got a 25-point spread, but police reform, you only have a 12-point spread with Biden enjoying that lead. Why are those why the difference, right? They favor Biden to deal with racial equality, and they do favor him to deal with police reform, but less so. And maybe that's because it makes them nervous that Biden's not as committed to some of what they'd like to see.
Where I was going to go with this, and we can talk more about it in the next segment, but the economy jobs goes to Trump. but dealing with COVID-19 goes to Biden. And to me, you really can't talk about one of those issues without talking about the other. Because whether you believe we should be opening up or not opening up, that's really not the question. But obviously, because we have opened up, the economy has improved. How much do you value taking care of the American people health-wise versus taking care of their bank account? And so I just find it very interesting that there's a 20-point discrepancy between these two numbers, that the economy has Donald Trump leading by 6%, but he's trailing Biden by 14 on how to deal with COVID-19. And to me, those two issues are linked very closely.
So we'll talk about why there's some incongruence there. What's happening? Why, as Lance pointed out, they are linked at the hip, at least right now, yet Americans aren't necessarily looking at them that way. What about the other issues? Where do voters land on immigration, dealing with China, foreign policy, healthcare? Who do they favor in these situations, and how do those tell us who's likely to win in November? In the third segment of today's show, you'll find out what Lance and I think about where things are headed, and you'll get to hear from a very, very special guest, our producer, Bradley, a first-time presidential voter. We'll get some input there from a Gen Zer on what he makes of everything that's going on, right? Because I think Lance and I try to highlight that young person perspective, and it's interesting to know you're going into this. This is your first election in 2020. What do you make of the landscape? To find out and learn about all of that, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Americans are starting to believe the coronavirus will be around longer. That's according to the CNBC article and their latest round of polling. 3/4 of respondents said that a new wave of coronavirus infections in the next 6 months is very or somewhat likely. 60% said the economy won't be fully restored until the next year or longer, up from 52% in April, and a 46% plurality of Americans said their bigger worry is that their state will move too fast in lifting virus restrictions, while just 30% said their concern restrictions will be lifted too slowly, down from 38% in April. So, Lance, that right there, what I just read, right, is this odd, as you pointed out, kind of mismatch here of they think that Biden would do a better job dealing with the virus, but they think Trump will do a better job ensuring economic success. And unfortunately, right, when we get to the ballot box in November, you can't choose both. You get to choose one of those. So how do we reconcile this, and which is likely to win out? Are people more scared of the coronavirus, or are they more scared of how the economy will perform? And I'm not sure that people know right now. I think that's part of the problem, right, is they're conflicted on that.
It's hard to predict what will happen at this point because a lot of things can happen. The economy could take another downturn. The virus could, disappear. And then all of a sudden the economy just takes off and Trump probably wins re-election. Or we could have, as we're seeing, a spike now this summer, and you send kids back to school and all of a sudden everybody's back in a closed environment, and people keep, a third of the country still keeps this idea that they don't want to wear a mask. And we see an even greater spread of the virus than we do right now that could lead to another shutdown, which would then tank the economy again. And then, Joe Biden probably wins the election. And probably what will happen is something in between. Do people become more scared, of the virus? And are we forced to close? And does the economy go down a little bit? Obviously, if the economy goes down, President Trump doesn't have too many issues from which he looks good to the voters, at least right now. But again, there could be a third thing thrown into the mix that hasn't even happened yet.
We're assuming that it'll just stay coronavirus and the economy and racial.
Think about what's happened in 4 months, right? was the 1st of July. Think back to the 1st of February. This wouldn't even be an issue, right? So, anything could happen in the next few months to change the outcome of the election. So it's all just supposition. But again, you can't like what the president is doing. I mean, you can like what he's doing with the economy, but he's doing it by saying, well, the spread of the virus isn't that big of a deal. So which is more important, to stop the spread of the virus or to get the economy closer to where it was? That's what people have to decide, because I don't see it unless you can explain it to me. I don't see how you can do both.
Well, see that
I don't see how you can deal with the coronavirus and make sure people are safe and improve the economy. I don't think you can put those two things together.
I don't want to get off onto a coronavirus discussion. I just think it's a shame, Lance. I feel like I say this anymore. It feels like almost every episode that we're being forced to choose between the two. I understand that you can't have all of both, but we could have some of both if our leaders quit acting like idiots and got a hold of being a leader instead of just being these stupid pawns that don't do anything. And this is,
I agree with you 100%.
I am criticizing Republicans and Democrats right now, just to be clear to everybody, because
I agree with you 100%, but we're not doing that.
No, we're not. It's either, right, we are terrified and we can't open and we can't do anything because we just can't. Or it's, we just open up and, hopefully everybody does their part. And it's like, okay,
everybody practices social distancing. Everybody puts on a mask. Everybody does what they're supposed to do. And then we could do both, but we're not doing that. But these people are going to vote, right? And they're humans, and that's the way humans respond. You tell them to, you lock them up and they go with it. And then you say, okay, well, then they get this idea that, well, it's, I've got to get out. I've got to do these things. And it's, I'm going stir crazy. And it's like, well, and the odds are I'm probably not going to be too bad. I probably won't give it to grandma or grandpa. And me as a millennial, I'm not going to catch it anyway. And if I do, it's just going to be the flu, which, the odds are in your favor, but do you really want to roll the dice with that kind of stuff? Because you're talking about life and death issues.
I think there's a lot of social pressure though, too.
Yes.
That whole, we don't see other people wearing masks. So even if you think you should, right? Like, even if it's like, yeah, I see the reason you should, right? There's that, but nobody else is. So I don't want, and it's such a dumb reason not to, but it's a very real thing. I mean, is that a bad reason to not wear a mask? Absolutely. Regardless of whether or not you like masks, to not do something because other people aren't doing it, whatever that thing is, that's a bad reason to not do something, right?
Talking about healthcare, does this tell us something about the mood of the country when President Biden, we did a show this fall about the difference of the Democratic healthcare, and Biden is 16 percentage points up over Trump when it comes to healthcare issue. So does that mean that people, because Donald Trump, one of the things was, I'm going to get rid of Obamacare. And with, in the first 2 years with a Republican majority in the House and the Senate, he didn't do it. And now we're seeing that by 16%, the Democratic candidate is leading on the issue of healthcare. And, Mr. Biden was the vice president for President Obama. And so does that mean that the nation is saying we would rather have our current healthcare than to get rid of it?
I think it's, Lance, I have run into very few people that love Obamacare, but I've also run into very few people that want a lot of what Obamacare has brought to the table to just disappear. They want something better, okay? And I think this is Republicans and Democrats. They all want something better, but they don't want to lose what they already have to get something better.
Like we've always talked about, right? You take some of what because Obamacare is not everything that he wanted, but he took what he could. He used the old Ronald Reagan mentality. I'll get 30 or 40% of what I want now, and then I'll come back later and I'll get 20 or 30% of the 60% that's still left, and I'll gradually get what I want. And I think that explains.
Give people a taste.
Right. It explains exactly what you just said. People are like, well, we want more than this, but don't take away what we have. My complaint isn't that it's there. My complaint is I want more than what's there, which plays right into the Democrats' hands.
And people see that there's areas that it doesn't excel in, that it causes some challenges in. And I think that's part of why Republicans never, there's no excuse, right? I mean, you controlled Congress, both the House and the Senate, and you controlled the presidency. So if you really wanted to get rid of Obamacare, you could have, but you didn't, because you knew that you couldn't come up with anything, that was better, that wasn't giving in to Democratic demands. And this is, again, I'm criticizing Republicans right now, but both sides do this. We could have given in and done something for our voters, but we would have given in and given ground to the Democrats, so we did nothing instead. And that is just, I just hate that, Lance. More than anything, that is the worst. It's like, what happened? For all of you that loved Reagan, where did that go, right? The 40%. Take what you can get and go. You had the majority. You could have made some changes. And yeah, does that mean you would have had to leave Obamacare in existence and left pre-existing condition protect? Yep, you would have had to do all that. But you could have improved healthcare, and you chose not to because you didn't want to cede any ground.
And the outcome is that 16% of the voters now favor the Democratic candidate over the sitting president on the issue of healthcare.
And if you had healthcare in the economy and jobs, then maybe this would be a different conversation, right? Then we'd say Trump's probably got it locked up. If the Republicans had gotten something done that people liked on healthcare and he had the economy, now old people are definitely going to vote, right? I mean, there's like no question. You took care of healthcare.
We know they're going to vote no matter what.
So we're going to look at coming up, even though Biden leads, right, Trump on all issues except the economy, does that really matter? All this that Lance and I have talked about, does any of it really matter? He leads in the economy. Is that really the only thing that matters? Well, part of figuring that out and finding out what Lance and I think about the upcoming election means that we're also going to get to talk to Bradley, our producer, a Gen Zer, a first-time presidential voter. We'll get some perspective on what does he make of all this? What really matters to him in the upcoming election, right? That's what we're going to find out. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The latest CNBC poll shows that Biden leads Trump on all issues except the economy. But does that matter? Does it matter? That's the question that we want to answer now. We see that Joe Biden has gained support among younger voters with all the protests going on. They want to see change. They believe that Biden is a more promising choice. And this is an important selection of words here. A more promising choice than Trump. They don't think that Biden, they don't love him. They're not, some of them do, obviously, but the majority of them don't think that Biden's just this fantastic candidate and they're super stoked to go vote for him. That's not what it is. It's that they want to see change, and they think they've got better odds with Biden on what they care most about, which at the moment seems to be racial justice.
And 4 years ago, they stayed away. It was like, they either supported Hillary, as the article points out, right? As you were reading before the show, they supported Hillary, the older millennials, or if they were younger, they were upset that Bernie wasn't there, thought Bernie got cheated, and so they stayed home and didn't vote at all. And that made the difference in a few of the key battleground states with the Electoral College. And so, again, this comes back to, will they stay motivated because they know, because we have an open book on President Trump and what he's going to do and what he said, or so are they going to go with that for another 4 years, or will the, lack of a better word, I guess, but the threat of that or the likelihood of that happening, will that motivate the millennials to get out there and vote?
Lance poses a lot of good questions. We're going to get his official prediction in a moment, but we don't want to skew what we're going to hear from our producer. So with that, let's turn to Bradley now. Bradley, this is your first presidential election coming up this November. What a baptism by fire here you've got for for an election year. Holy crap. Probably one of the oddest election years on the books. Not only do we have two very interesting candidates, but we've got a global pandemic going on. We've got Gen Z, which is all about this defying labels and making fun of millennials and all this good stuff. Sorry, that's an oversimplification, but got to poke a little fun at them. And so where are you at, right? Ultimately, you've got these two choices. I mean, yes, there's other choices. I understand. But for all intents and purposes, if you're going to vote for somebody who's going to be the next president, right now, you've mainly got Biden or Trump. Those are your choices. What do you make of everything that's going on? I mean, we see all these issues: economy, jobs, immigration, dealing with China, foreign policy, police reform, dealing with COVID, healthcare, racial equality. Which of these issues are the ones that you're most concerned about?
To be completely honest, I'm quite conflicted with my two options of Trump and Biden, mainly because I don't see myself aligning much with either of them. But as far as which issues matter most to me, I think naturally healthcare is one that sticks out to me. It's just something I'm interested in. I think it's hard not to be concerned with the protests that are going on just because it's so current. I typically believe that more government policy isn't going to help the issue, in my opinion.
Do you plan on voting this fall? Or will you be so involved in school and everything else that you don't see yourself getting educated and therefore maybe staying home because you don't want to be one of those uneducated voters? And we don't want you to be either. But do you see yourself in the next 4 months becoming educated on some of these issues and where the different candidates stand so you can make an informed decision? Or do you see yourself letting it slip away and then saying, you know what, I really don't know what either one of these gentlemen stand for, so I just won't vote?
Or the third option of I like neither of them so much that I can't bring, even if I get educated on it, I don't see me being willing to sacrifice the things that I dislike about them to be able to vote on them. And there's a lot of different ways you could go, but I think that's a good question, Lance, because that's part of the fear with the younger millennials, right, and the older Gen Z, those that can vote but are voting for the first time, is
will they show up?
Right. Because it's, and we're hearing it from Bradley, a clear apathy for everything that's going on.
My perspective isn't the same as everybody else's, so I don't want to be put as the spokesperson for my whole generation.
Of course not.
No, you're not the voice of your generation. We're not going to do that to you. But what do you think you're going to do? I am kind of putting your feet to the fire here a little bit. What do you think you're going to do in the next 4 months?
Yeah. So I wish I would have been more able to answer this, but right. If I do decide to vote, which I am strongly leaning towards doing so, I'm going to have to get my values in line and then just see which candidate best fits my set of values and what I care about most. And at the moment, I'm unfortunately cannot present fully what I want at the moment right now.
You should know, Bradley, that you reflect like 60 or 70% of most voters who do not make a decision until within, a few weeks or even the day of the election. A lot of voters don't make, and the voters that ultimately decide most elections are the 20% that don't know up until right at the very end. It's not the people that know months and months out usually that make the difference.
Yeah, I was going to say, please don't feel bad about being where you are, because I think you represent a very large number of people in this election. At least even from this poll, you're in 15% of the population because you didn't pick one or the other. So I think your answer is very demonstrative, is showing where a large segment of our society is 4 months out. So I appreciate your honesty and your answer.
Is it just to be clear, Bradley, it sounds like for you, it's a mostly pragmatic decision. What I mean by that is for you, you're going to sit down and figure out, here are my values, right? Here's what I think about, here's the things important to me. And here's what I think needs to be done on these things. And then I'm basically going to go through and do sort of the equivalent of a checklist to see who meets more of those things. And then that's who I am most interested in voting for, is the person that aligns with the most things that I want to see happen.
Correct.
That's what I was getting from what you were saying. And it's it's refreshing to hear that a young person is thinking about it that way, because a lot of times that is not how we hear most people think about it. Not even young people, just people in general usually don't. That's not how they approach it. They just kind of, who do I like? And that's what I'm doing. Obviously, I think Lance and I try to approach it similarly to that. We follow it a little bit more, I think, than most people do, in terms of we're out in front of it further. So we tend to know more of what the people that we're looking at support and don't support. But it's a similar process of which candidate, regardless of party, is going to do more of what I think needs to be done. And that's the person I'm interested in. In your case, you're just saying you just don't know yet because you haven't put all that in there, right? Haven't gone through the process of figuring out everything that they're for and what you most care about. Let me ask you a different question, hopefully one that's easier to answer. Because this is not unique to you at all. I experienced this with a number of people that I coached this past year for public speaking in Gen Z. I asked them and did a little, what do you make of the political climate? This was late 2019. Okay. Like, who are you interested in? What's going on? They all had very similar, very uncomfortable, Lance, very uncomfortable, right? Do not want to answer that question. And that's not a judgment. I'm just saying that's an observation.
Is that different though from you? Because when I remember my first presidential election, and I couldn't wait to vote, I knew all about it. And I know that I became a history teacher, and those kids that you were talking to probably aren't. Bradley's looking to go into the medical field. Is that just because of me and my personality? Or do you think it's an overall difference in young people today with all of the distractions they have with their devices and YouTube and Twitter and TikTok and all these different things? Are they just not into it like you and I were because I know I was into it just wholeheartedly. I couldn't wait for the first opportunity to vote. And then to vote in a presidential election, it was like I got all excited and giddy about it. So is that a change? Or do you think you and I are outside the norm, and what you're seeing with the young people you're working with now is more normal?
I think there is a sincere fear of judgment and controversy as a result of what they feel. And I think that's a very legitimate concern. Unfortunately, I think the generations in front of Gen Z have done a grave disservice by creating a political climate where you yell and scream at people for not thinking the way you think. So there is a real, I don't want to tell you because I don't know how you're going to react, and maybe I like you, and I don't want to say something that ruins the other stuff that I value. I don't want to have to make a choice about I can't be your friend or I can't work with you because I'm going to say something and maybe I already know you don't agree with what I'm about to say. And then I don't know how that's going to change things. I don't know. I'm not saying that's what Bradley thinks. I'm just saying that is a total guess, but that's from the individuals I've talked to, I think that's part of it. And I think a fear about making the right decision. Gen Z, a lot of the data shows us, Lance, right, that they feel this kind of sincere acceptance that the world is a messed up place, and they're not really necessarily sure if they can fix it, but they want to try. So I think there's a weight to the decision too of does anything that I decide really matter anyway?
So I hear you saying two things. One, we need to teach more debate. And secondly, we need to let these young people coming up learn to make more of their own decisions instead of being helicopter adults and making sure they don't fall down and make mistakes. We have to let them make mistakes and learn to make decisions so that then when it comes time in life to make big decisions, they've made smaller decisions and they're more comfortable in making that tough decision. That's what I'm hearing you say.
And I think respecting the decision maybe is an even bigger part of it. It's I'm okay. I want you to make a decision as long as you make the decision I want you to make.
That's not decision making. And that's not teaching people how to debate. That I'm still going to be your friend. I'm still going to like you. I can still work with you if we disagree, but let's not be afraid of having a healthy discussion about a topic and then walk away still with the same relationship that we had beforehand.
I know there's I know there's a lot of, not a lot, but the loud people are the ones that often get attention, Bradley. You know, I mean, that's true in every generation, right? That's just how it works. The people that are loudest are the ones that we usually tend to judge everybody off of, but the majority are usually not the ones that are the ones shouting out their opinions. So you hear what Lance and I are going back and forth on. Is this something your classmates, just your personal experience? I'm not asking you to judge the whole generation, but other people your age that you know, is any of what we're saying, do you think that holds true? Or do they just not care? Or do they care a lot and they don't want people to judge them? What do you feel in regards to that? What do you see?
I feel the political climate is so divisive and sometimes
toxic.
Toxic. People get attacked. I feel like a lot of people in my generation don't even want to get involved with that. With that climate. So I think that it just deters a lot of people away from having an opinion, or if they have an opinion, speaking out.
Well, that's covered in our mission statement, which is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. So we have a lot of conversations on here where we don't agree, or we bring up things that we know not everybody is going to agree with, but just to get people to think and honestly and respectfully make a decision based on the information that we have, not innuendos, not speculation, but okay, folks, this is what's going on, which is, you know, why we're talking about polling and things like that. And just to close, you know, I think everything's still up in the air. We can't say that where everybody is in July is where everybody's going to be in November, because we don't know what's going to happen in the world. We have two issues that could go either way over the next 4 months. And there could be a third, fourth, and even fifth issue that come in and play a role in this election. So for any of us to sit here and say right now, this is exactly what we think is going to happen, I think is doing people a disservice. I think we need to have the discussions. We need to talk, find out about the candidates, which one comes closer to doing the things that you want done. And that's who you should support. But you should honestly investigate their platforms and what they believe in and listen to them, and then decide who's telling the truth and who's not, and who you can support. And please participate in the election. That's the key. If you like what you hear, tell your friends about us. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and anywhere else fine podcasts are found.
isidewith.com. Good resource. Lance and I have used it before. If you're out there, especially if you're Gen Z or millennials, you're young people out there today, and you share similar sentiment to some of what Lance and I and Bradley discussed today, remember that there's a reason we maintain a secret ballot in this country. And even if you're not going to talk about who you're voting for ahead of time, please go vote, because it does still count, and you should still contribute your voice, and you don't have to tell anybody. And that's the law. So don't let anybody convince you that you've got to tell them how you're going to vote. And feel free to explore the resources that are at your disposal. The info's out there, and we need you, regardless of where you come down, to be part of it. That's what makes all of this possible. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to Bradley for providing his input today, and as always, for getting the show edited and put together. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.